From the massive aerial spraying of mutagenic defoliants in Vietnam to the destruction of the oil platform Nowruz during the Iran-Iraq War, modern warfare has taken a heavy environmental toll. But the recent titanic struggle in the Arabian Gulf between massed high-tech weaponry and a madman holding a match has resulted in the ecological destabilization of an entire region, and possibly the globe. To ignore the growing environmental catastrophe in the Gulf is to miss this conflict's biggest lesson and warning. For this was more than a fight between armies. This is a war which continues today. This is eco-war. In late January 1991, shortly after the first missile attacks on Tel Aviv, environmental journalist Randy Thomas and eco-artist Carl Chaplin flew to Amman, Jordan. Best known for his Art Nouveau series of paintings depicting world capitals under nuclear attack, Chaplin feared that a miscalculation could trigger 1,200 nuclear warheads in the region, igniting the Middle East under searing mushroom clouds. It was Chaplin's intention to exhibit his paintings in Amman, sounding a warning and an urgent call for peace from the heart of the conflict. Oil has been used as a weapon in the Middle East since biblical times. A private briefing by Dr. Abdallah Toukan, top scientific advisor to the King of Jordan, convinced the pair that oil smoke was the most imminent ecological threat.
Well, it depends on the intensity of and the amount of the soot and smoke that comes out. And that will then start reducing the amount of, let's say, temperature or radiation arriving at the surface of the Earth by a couple of percent. Now, how can we stop it? I don't know. The war. We just can't seem to come close to it. We presented this to, by the way, in New York, we presented this to Perez de Cuellar, the Secretary General.
Did you get any response?
Nothing. We presented it to Dr. Mustafa Tolba in Nairobi, Kenya, and he got about 16 different messages from England from all these kind of different lords. And a lot of pressure from England, quiet.
We would like to propose that an east-west joint research vessel go into the Gulf to monitor the effects of the one well that is already burning, since we know dramatic effects have already started with something that has been called black rain.
Back in their Marriott hotel room, Chaplin began phoning contacts worldwide, trying to find a ship to carry the newly formed Gulf Environmental Emergency Response Team into the Gulf. Paul Watson and the Sea Shepherd put to sea within 48 hours, but like too many vital environmental missions, the ship ran out of fuel and funds in Florida. Outside in the streets of Amman, Palestinians responded to the imminent threat of attack with cries of defiance and calls for peace.
What is happening really is that if they solve our problem, if they solve the Palestinian problem, everything will be solved.
And if not, this will continue?
Yeah, the tension will keep forever in this region.
Chaplin set up a makeshift easel in the hotel lobby and began a new painting. For his Iraqi and Jordanian audience, Black Rain was not an artist's fantasy, but prophecy. Black Rain and the Art Nouveau show were exhibited in front of Amman's Roman amphitheater, ancient crossroads of the Middle East. On February 10th, as Bahrain braced for an oil slick bigger than that entire island nation, Garrett's Randy Thomas arrived to offer technical assistance. The oil slick hit Saudi Arabia instead. Flying north along the Saudi coast about 120 miles south of Kuwait, just before midday, an unearthly darkness floods the helicopter, bringing bitter cold. At Safaniya, the flight turns south, tracing an oil slick Saudi environmental officials estimate to be between 16 and 28 times bigger than Exxon Valdez. The world has never seen anything like this. More than half of the Saudi Arabian coastline has been heavily oiled, more than half of the wetlands destroyed. At risk are millions of migrating birds, dugongs, dolphins, turtles, as well as the seagrass and coral reef nurseries in which all Gulf fish and shellfish breed. Also jeopardized by the southward flowing slick are dozens of desalination plants on which millions of human lives depend. That's not the beautiful blue of the Gulf. That's oil, crude oil. The aircraft flew for 2 hours at 120 miles per hour. Not for a single moment did they fail to see heavy oil washing ashore. There were American and Saudi observers on board. At the end of the flight, no one could speak. By late March, only 2 cleanup teams were at work. 2 skimmers and 2 small hoses dipped like soda straws into a sea of oil. At a bird rescue station near Al Jubail, volunteers cleaned more than 1,300 oiled birds. At least 35,000 other birds were feared killed in the early days of the Gulf Eco-War. In late March, shortly after liberation, Thomas joined 2 members of the international conservation organization Earth Trust in Kuwait. Though it was nearly noon, the team was horrified to find themselves driving into the Great Bergan oil field in almost total darkness. Nothing had prepared them for this. They kept looking up for low-flying jets until they realized that the sound of turbines was the shriek of high-pressure oil venting from the earth and igniting like giant blowtorches all around them. It was like the aftermath of a nuclear holocaust. All around was death and devastation. "10% of the world's oil reserves lie in Kuwait. Once loosed from Aladdin's lamp, this genie could not be restrained." The Earth Trust team drove into the center of the oil field where they donned protective gear and entered a burning well to collect soil samples. No environmental protection agencies were releasing their test data, but it is well understood that whenever crude oil is burned, a host of deadly compounds are released. These include poison gases as well as highly carcinogenic hydrocarbons and equally deadly heavy metals, such as cadmium, copper, nickel, and lead. The smoke cloud grew with frightening rapidity, spreading over Iraq, southern Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, and Bahrain. Carbon soot is a far more effective sunblock than volcanic ash. Temperature drops of 30 degrees Fahrenheit testified to 100,000 tons of soot spewing into Kuwait's skies every day. War wreckage undergoing years of corrosion in only 8 weeks indicated very high levels of sulfur dioxide. SO2 becomes sulfuric acid when exposed to moisture, such as rain or human mucous tissue. 50,000 tons of sulfur dioxide and 850,000 tons of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, are pouring into Earth's atmosphere from Kuwait every 24 hours. As carbon fallout rained down on Kuwait City and the Arabian Sea, the sabotage of water, phone, and power lines by retreating Iraqi troops left the Kuwait government paralyzed. 1,000 So Earth Trust received official permission to open the Kuwait Environmental Information Center in the lobby of the International Hotel. Here they displayed maps and oil spill contingency plans salvaged from a booby-trapped office in the ransacked Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research. A mine like this one was their first close call with ordnance pollution. Kuwait scientists joined field surveys into a desert potent with hidden dangers, like these landmines, which the action team walked within inches of while searching for the source of a desert oil spill. Unexploded Allied cluster bombs were equally lethal. Hospitals report an average of 4 casualties every day, mostly shepherd and Bedouin children, blown up by unexploded ordnance half buried by shifting sands. Hundreds of camels and sheep have also died from explosives whose menace will linger for generations to come. The rule for avoiding mines was to avoid heavily fortified coastal areas, but it was here that the team searched for birds coming up from North Africa and the Southern Gulf. They never arrived. At most, they counted hundreds, perhaps several thousand, of the millions of expected transient grebes, plovers, cormorants, flamingos, and terns. Dr. Charles Pelcher, foremost authority on Arabian Gulf birds, was brought back to help solve the riddle of the missing migrations. A 14-year resident of Kuwait, Dr. Pelcher returned to find the home he'd shared with his wife trashed by Iraqi troops. A decade's research material had been scattered underfoot. Birds are not the only creatures endangered by the oil fires. Dr. David Snashal, an air pollution specialist with Britain's Commonwealth Health Department, told Kuwait scientists that the size and level of particulates monitored in Kuwait are very high, unusually high. Terming these particles very carcinogenic, the medical doctor predicted a sharp jump in lung cancer among Kuwait residents within 10 to 15 years. The air pollution expert also warned of catastrophic health effects if the smoke cloud from 700 burning oil wells descended to street level. 2 nights later, hot, toxic smoke from hundreds of blazing wells sank into the nearby streets of Ahmadi. Panicked families ran screaming into their homes, slamming doors and windows on rooms which reeked of gasoline. Student volunteers and several Kuwait scientists conducted a house-by-house survey in Ahmadi and 7 other districts closest to the burning oil field. More than 1,400 people were asked if their health had suffered from the oil fires and if enough was being done to assist them. A doctor at the Ahmadi hospital told the field team that at least 1/3 of her 30 daily patients were exhibiting pollution-related symptoms, including eye irritation, first-time asthma attacks, flaking skin, and hair loss. The skin of some Ahmadi children was indelibly tattooed by oil from the inside out. Babies developed strange rashes.
There is also like epidemic of flu or something from the air. They don't know what's the reason. Maybe because of the spring season or because of this. But the rashes is increasing.
The controversial survey findings were never released, but leaked results showed that health complaints were widespread. More than half of those questioned complained of difficulty in breathing. 86% of surveyed Ahmadi residents wished to be evacuated. Hitching rides with the Kuwaiti Air Force, the action team flew weekly survey missions over a country beset by a multitude of environmental emergencies. Some oil lakes are a half-mile long and 5 meters deep. Many are now burning. Hundreds of miles of tank tracks, trenches, and revetments have ravaged the microorganisms which anchor the desert sands. Accelerating desertification combined with a lack of photosynthesis, winter temperatures, and carbon rain threaten to disrupt the plant cycle on which all desert life depends. One flight discovered a miles-long trench filled with oil to thwart an Allied assault which never came.
So it was coming up here, we crossed this road, the pipeline crossed this road, and it came up to this level roughly. Then it divided west and east through a T-junction. And there were pipes running from there with control valves. One pouring oil in this side and the others were supplying crude to the trenches that the Iraqis dug out in this area.
Where is everybody? The three Earth Trust personnel kept asking. It seemed incredible that they and a new curator for the Kuwait Zoo were the sole hands-on international environmental response to Kuwait and the biggest ecological disaster in modern times. The rest of the world and many Kuwaitis continue to deny there was any problem at all, but common sense warned, what you see is what you breathe.
Hey, it's raining oil. Ooh, I better slow down. I better slow way down. Easier to go to windward in these things. God, I can feel the heat through the window, man. Hang on, I'm not slowing down a lot.
On April 24th, an aerial survey flight discovered a major new oil slick flooding south from Iraq. Soon after the action team notified the Kuwait government of this new threat, crude oil began washing ashore along a 30-mile stretch of coastline. Five other sources of oil were identified leaking from damaged oil storage tanks, the Sea Island loading terminal, and the tanker Al Faoud. An Earth Trust appeal brought the Gulf's only oil spill cleanup ship into Kuwait's Al Shuaibah port. New Zealand ornithologist Rick Thorpe briefed members of the United Nations Environment Program aboard the Al Wasset. But UNEP officials refused appeals for assistance, saying they would study the matter further before drawing up an action plan in September. The conservationists' own action plan called for the immediate booming off of Kuwait's most critical wetlands at Al-Kiran. Loading donated oil booms onto a truck provided by the U.S. Army, they drove to Al-Kiran, where they launched the boom behind a salvaged skiff. Dodging mines on local beaches, 2 team members and an Egyptian chef from the hotel spent 5 days hauling the heavy boom across the fast-flowing estuary. The next survey flight showed the oil slick nearing one of Kuwait's 3 operating desalination plants at Al-Zur. When floating mines prevented deployment of the oil spill recovery ship, Thorpe and Thomas ran their boat up coast into the inlet arms of the seawater conversion plant to check for signs of oil. Mixing oil with chlorine used in desalination plants is deadly. Dr. Shamadan, a medical doctor with the U.S. National Cancer Research Institute, told them, if you want to test laboratory animals for cancer, about the worst thing you can give them is hydrocarbons mixed with chlorine. Officials said not to worry, the actual seawater intakes are 5 feet underwater. But as the floating oil weathers and thickens, it becomes neutrally buoyant, submerging to hover 3 to 6 feet beneath the surface. Living in Kuwait was like being in Chernobyl after the reactors blew. You knew that every breath you took was poisoned, but you could never be sure just how deadly those unknown toxins might be, or what cumulative effects they would have over time. Most nights, gunfire broke out in Kuwait's suburbs as rival political factions fought for turf and prestige. Raping and looting by Saudi, Egyptian, and Kuwaiti forces was widespread. Washington and Kuwait government officials kept insisting that everything was fine, but that was hard to believe when pets, plants, and animals sickened and died. If that's happening to the animals, people began asking, what is happening to us? They say Kuwait is free. True, its people have been saved from a brutal occupation, but Kuwait is not free. Kuwait is dying. it may never fully recover from an act of liberation which forced a tyrant's hand. Certainly the entire world has lost this conflict. Soot particles from Kuwait's burning oil fields are now being tracked around a haze-shrouded globe. As cities everywhere complain of unusual wintry weather, record-breaking floods in Europe, China, Iran, and Indonesia have left millions homeless. Allied governments continue to pour billions of dollars in arms into the post-war Gulf, while ignoring an embarrassing ecological crisis which is setting the stage for the next Middle East war, this time over acid rain ruined crops and contaminated water. There is still time for nations to come together and heed this global crisis. The wild creatures are innocent. This wounded planet cannot absorb another war of this magnitude.
Away. Yeah, I saw the news. Happens every day. Some cronkite look-alike numb from what he's reading. Wake me up, wake me up. It's one of us that's screaming. Save this house. Save this house. Save this house. Save this house. Save this house, party's gotta end. Welcome mat's worn out, and the roof will never mend. The furniture's on fire, this house is a disgrace. Someone change the locks before we trash this place.